my God, is that in there? Daniel, what do you want me to do, huh?
The dog kept barking in front of the coffin. The miracle no one could have imagined. The German shepherd's howls pierced through the funeral home's solemn silence like breaking glass, his massive frame trembling as he refused to leave Officer Daniel Granger's casket. Rex had been Daniel's partner for 8 years, tracking criminals through Dallas back alleys and comforting victims with gentle patience, but nothing in his training had prepared mourners for the desperate intensity of his behavior at his handler's funeral. "He knows his daddy's gone," whispered Amanda Granger through her tears, watching Rex paw frantically at the polished mahogany that held her husband's body. The other officers exchanged uncomfortable glances. They'd seen police dogs grieve before, but Rex's agitation seemed different, urgent, as if he was trying to communicate something beyond loss. What happened next would transform a funeral into a miracle that defied every assumption about loyalty, intuition, and the mysterious bonds between souls who serve together in life and remain connected beyond death. The Henderson Funeral Home had hosted hundreds of police funerals over its 40-year history, but never one quite like Officer Daniel Granger's service in March 2024. The chapel overflowed with blue uniforms, American flags, and the controlled grief of law enforcement families who understood that every goodbye might be permanent. Daniel's death had struck the Dallas Police Department like lightning. A routine traffic stop turned deadly when a desperate fugitive chose violence over surrender. Rex embodied everything noble about police K-9 units' intelligence that bordered on supernatural loyalty that exceeded human capacity and instincts honed through years of life or death decisions alongside his human partner. At 6 years old, the German Shepherd had accumulated commendations that rivaled most human officers, drug busts that took dealers off the streets, missing persons cases where his nose found hope in hopeless situations, and bomb detections that had saved countless lives. Daniel Granger had been Rex's entire world since puppyhood, the human who'd shaped his training, celebrated his successes, and provided the partnership that gave meaning to every working day. Their bond transcended the typical handler-dog relationship to become something approaching telepathy. Rex could read Daniel's moods before words were spoken, while Daniel understood Rex's alerts with the precision that kept them both alive during dangerous operations. Amanda Granger sat in the front row, her 8-month pregnancy showing beneath her black dress as she struggled to process becoming a widow at 26 while preparing to raise their first child alone. Her relationship with Rex had always been complicated. She'd known that Daniel's first loyalty belonged to his 4-legged partner, that Rex's needs came before comfort, that their lives revolved around shift schedules and call-outs that kept her husband away more often than home. The funeral attendees represented the extended family that law enforcement creates among people who risk their lives for strangers' safety. Captain Morris had worked with Daniel for 12 years, watching him grow from nervous rookie to confident veteran who trained new officers with patience and wisdom. Detective Sarah Kim had been Daniel's backup on the fatal traffic stop, her survivor's guilt written in the dark circles under her eyes and the tremor in her hands when she thought no one was watching. The chapel itself carried the weight of institutional grief, American flags at half-staff honor guard members whose perfect posture couldn't hide their emotional strain, and the formal rituals that helped law enforcement families process loss too great for ordinary mourning. The bagpipes, the 21-gun salute, the folded flag presentation, all familiar ceremonies that provided structure when chaos threatened to overwhelm. Rex's behavior had been unusual from the moment Daniel's body arrived at the funeral home. Instead of the quiet sadness that typically characterized grieving animals, the German Shepherd displayed agitation that bordered on panic. He'd refused food for 3 days, paced constantly, and showed none of the acceptance that grief counselors had told Amanda to expect from pets processing loss. The mystery deepened during the viewing when Rex had approached the casket with careful steps that suggested both reverence and urgent purpose. His initial sniffing had seemed normal. Dogs often investigated their deceased handlers as part of their mourning process. But his subsequent behavior defied explanation: persistent scratching at the casket's base, mournful whines that seemed to carry specific meaning, and an intensity of focus that suggested he was responding to something invisible to human senses. The funeral director, James Henderson, had 40 years of experience with grieving families and their pets. But Rex's behavior was unprecedented in its persistence and specificity. The dog's actions seemed driven by knowledge rather than emotion, purpose rather than confusion, as if he understood something about Daniel's death that the humans mourning him had missed entirely. The transformation from normal funeral grief to extraordinary mystery began when Rex's behavior escalated from mournful to desperate during the opening hymn. The German Shepherd, who'd been trained to remain silent during ceremonies and had demonstrated perfect discipline at countless public events, began emitting low whines that built to insistent barks despite Amanda's attempts to quiet him. "Rex, no," Amanda whispered, her voice carrying the authority that Daniel had taught her to use with the dog. But Rex ignored her completely unprecedented behavior for an animal whose obedience had been legendary throughout the Dallas Police Department. His focus remained fixed on the casket with laser intensity that suggested he was responding to something beyond human perception. Officer Tom Bryant, Daniel's longtime partner before Rex joined the team, recognized the signs of a working dog responding to a discovery. "Ma'am," he said quietly to Amanda, "that's not grief behavior. That's his alert posture. Rex thinks he's found something." The observation sent ripples of unease through the gathered officers who'd worked with Rex over the years. They knew the difference between a dog mourning his handler and a dog performing his duties. Rex's body language, the rigid stance, the focused attention, the insistent vocalizations indicated active detection rather than passive sorrow. Captain Morris approached the situation with the careful analysis that had made him an effective supervisor for 2 decades. Rex's training included narcotics detection, explosives, identification, and cadaver work, but none of those specialties explained his current behavior. The dog's alerts were specific and consistent, suggesting he'd detected something that required investigation rather than dismissal as grief-induced confusion. The funeral home staff grew increasingly nervous as Rex's vocalizations disrupted the solemn atmosphere they'd worked to create. James Henderson had never encountered a situation where a pet's behavior threatened to derail a service, while the organ music couldn't mask the dog's persistent attempts to communicate something that seemed desperately important to him. Amanda faced an impossible choice between respecting funeral traditions and honoring the instincts of the animal her husband had trusted with his life. Rex had never been wrong about his alerts during 8 years of police work. His accuracy rate approached 100% in controlled testing, and his real-world performance had saved countless lives through reliable detection abilities. "What if he's trying to tell us something?" Amanda asked Captain Morris, her voice barely audible above Rex's increasingly frantic barking. "Daniel always said Rex was never wrong about his alerts. What if this isn't grief?" The question forced everyone present to confront the possibility that Rex's behavior had purpose beyond mourning. The dog's persistence, his specific positioning near the casket, and his obvious frustration at being ignored suggested communication rather than confusion. Detective Kim, still processing her own trauma from witnessing Daniel's death, found herself studying Rex's behavior with investigative eyes rather than sympathetic assumptions. "Captain, I've seen Rex work hundreds of scenes. This isn't random. He's telling us something specific about that casket." The decision to investigate Rex's alerts was both procedural and personal. As law enforcement officers, they were trained to respect canine instincts that had proven reliable in life and death situations. As Daniel's friends and colleagues, they owed him the consideration of taking his partner's concerns seriously, even in death. "James," Captain Morris said to the funeral director, "we need to open the casket. Rex is responding to something, and we need to know what it is before we proceed with the service." The request was unprecedented in Henderson Funeral Home's history, creating legal and practical complications that required immediate resolution. But the gathered officers' unified support for investigating Rex's alerts, combined with Amanda's authorization as next of kin, provided the authority needed to pursue the mystery that was transforming Daniel's funeral into something entirely unexpected. Rex's barking intensified as funeral home staff prepared to open the casket, his excitement suggesting that his alerts were finally being taken seriously by the humans he'd been trying to reach. The casket opening revealed Daniel Granger in perfect repose, his uniform pressed and medals gleaming. But Rex's reaction to the exposed body was immediate and even more intense than his previous alerts. The German shepherd's barking reached a crescendo that echoed through the chapel as he focused on something specific within the casket that human eyes couldn't immediately identify. "There," whispered Detective Kim, pointing to a slight irregularity in Daniel's uniform jacket where the fabric seemed to bulge almost imperceptibly. "Rex is focused on his chest area. Something's under his jacket." James Henderson's professional composure cracked as he realized that his careful preparation of Daniel's body might have missed something crucial. The funeral director's 40 years of experience had never included discovering foreign objects within caskets during services, creating unprecedented territory that challenged every protocol he'd established. Amanda's heart pounded as she approached the casket, her pregnancy making movement awkward, but her determination overriding physical discomfort. "Daniel," she whispered to her dead husband, "what did you leave for us to find?" The discovery that followed would transform everyone's understanding of both Daniel's final days and Rex's extraordinary loyalty. Carefully positioned against Daniel's chest, nestled within his uniform jacket, was a newborn German shepherd puppy, so small she could fit in human hands. The tiny animal was breathing warm and apparently healthy, despite being confined within the casket for hours. Rex's behavior immediately shifted from frantic alerting to protective positioning as he recognized the puppy as the object of his search. His barking ceased, replaced by gentle whining that seemed designed to comfort rather than alarm the infant animal he'd been trying to reach. The transformation was so complete that it confirmed the purposeful nature of his earlier behavior. How is this possible? Amanda gasped, her medical training as a nurse conflicting with the evidence before her eyes. Newborn puppies required constant warmth, feeding, and care to survive, yet this one appeared to have thrived in impossible circumstances. The mystery deepened when Detective Kim discovered a sealed envelope pinned to the inside of Daniel's jacket, positioned where only careful inspection would reveal it. The envelope bore Amanda's name in Daniel's unmistakable handwriting, suggesting that her husband had anticipated this exact scenario despite the impossibility of predicting his own death. Captain Morris coordinated the scene with investigative precision while funeral attendees struggled to process what they were witnessing. The puppy's presence in the casket defied logical explanation, while Rex's successful detection suggested foreknowledge that exceeded normal canine capabilities. The situation required immediate veterinary attention for the puppy, while preserving evidence that might explain the impossible circumstances. The letter Amanda opened with trembling hands contained Daniel's explanation for what appeared to be a carefully orchestrated plan that had somehow survived his unexpected death. His words, written in the practical tone he'd used for police reports, described a pregnant German shepherd he'd discovered during his final shift, a stray animal who'd given birth behind the police station but died from complications that left one surviving puppy. Amanda, Daniel had written, "If you're reading this, it means Rex found what I left for you. I know this seems crazy, but I had a feeling something might happen to me, and I wanted to make sure our family had something to remember me by. Rex knows about the puppy. I've been training him to protect her. She's strong like her daddy, and she'll grow up to be everything Rex is. Take care of them both." The revelation that Daniel had somehow anticipated his death while arranging for the puppy's protection challenged everyone's understanding of coincidence intuition and the bonds between partners who'd faced danger together for 8 years. His letter detailed feeding instructions, vaccination schedules, and even a suggested name, Hope. Rex's role in the plan became clearer as Amanda read further. Daniel had spent his final weeks training Rex to recognize the puppy's scent, to protect her when she was vulnerable, and to alert humans when she needed attention. The dog's behavior at the funeral represented successful completion of a mission his handler had entrusted to him before death separated them. The veterinary examination that followed confirmed the puppy's miraculous condition. Despite being separated from her mother and confined in impossible circumstances, Hope showed no signs of distress, dehydration, or hypothermia. Her survival suggested either medical impossibility or intervention that exceeded natural explanation. The funeral service that resumed after Hope's discovery was fundamentally different from the solemn ceremony that had begun hours earlier. Daniel's death, while still tragic, was now accompanied by the gift of new life that carried his legacy forward through the partner he'd trusted most. Rex's behavior was revealed not as grief-induced confusion, but as successful execution of his final mission for the handler who trained him to never give up. Amanda's decision to adopt Hope was immediate and unanimous among Daniel's colleagues, who understood that the puppy represented their fallen friend's final contribution to the K-9 program that had defined his career. Rex's acceptance of his new role as Hope's protector provided him with purpose that transcended his loss, while honoring the partnership that had shaped both their lives. The media attention that followed focused on the mystery of Hope's survival, rather than exploiting the tragedy of Daniel's death, creating a narrative of hope and loyalty that inspired law enforcement families nationwide, while demonstrating the extraordinary bonds that exist between handlers and their K-9 partners. The crisis that nearly destroyed everything came 48 hours after Hope's miraculous discovery, when veterinary tests revealed complications that threatened to transform Daniel's final gift into heartbreak. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the police department's contracted veterinarian, delivered news that shattered the hope that had sustained Amanda through her husband's funeral and the overwhelming media attention that followed. "I'm sorry, Amanda," Dr. Martinez said gently, her professional composure barely containing her personal anguish. "Hope is showing signs of a congenital heart defect that's, well, it's incompatible with long-term survival. The stress of her circumstances may have accelerated the condition. Without immediate surgery that costs upward of $15,000, she probably won't live another week." The words hit Amanda like physical blows, each syllable destroying the fragile sense of purpose that Hope's presence had provided during her darkest hours. The puppy, who'd seemed like Daniel's final gift, was actually another loss waiting to happen, another source of grief that her already shattered heart couldn't absorb. Rex's reaction to Hope's declining condition was immediate and devastating. The German Shepherd, who'd seemed revitalized by his new protective mission, returned to the desperate agitation that had characterized his funeral behavior. His whining became constant, his refusal to leave Hope's side absolute, as if his presence alone could sustain the life that medical science suggested was already forfeit. The financial reality was crushing. Amanda's pregnancy had already stretched their savings thin, while Daniel's death meant losing half their household income, along with the health insurance that might have covered veterinary emergencies. The $15,000 required for Hope's surgery represented more money than Amanda could access without selling their home, the house Daniel had worked overtime to afford the place where she'd planned to raise their child. "I can't," Amanda sobbed to Captain Morris when he offered to organize a department fundraiser. "I can't ask people to donate money for a puppy when there are human families struggling to pay for their own medical bills. It's not right. It's not what Daniel would want." The moral complexity of the situation was tearing her apart. Hope's survival had seemed like divine intervention, a sign that Daniel's love had somehow transcended death to provide comfort during impossible grief. But the puppy's medical crisis was forcing choices between sentiment and practicality, between honoring Daniel's intentions and accepting financial reality. Rex's declining condition paralleled Hope's medical crisis in ways that terrified everyone who'd witnessed their bond. The German Shepherd stopped eating, refused to leave the veterinary clinic where Hope was receiving supportive care, and displayed symptoms of depression that suggested he understood the approaching loss better than the humans trying to save her. The darkest moment came when Dr. Martinez recommended euthanasia as the most humane option for Hope's suffering. The puppy's condition was deteriorating despite treatment, her heart defect causing respiratory distress that medication could only temporarily relieve. The veterinarian's suggestion was medically sound but emotionally devastating to Amanda, who saw Hope's death as final proof that Daniel's death had destroyed everything good in their lives. Maybe this is just life telling me that some miracles are too good to be true, Amanda whispered to Rex as they sat beside Hope's incubator in the veterinary ICU. Maybe I was foolish to think Daniel could protect us even after he was gone. Rex's response was to place his head on Amanda's lap while maintaining visual contact with Hope's enclosure, his body language suggesting protective vigil rather than acceptance of defeat. The dog's refusal to give up on Hope challenged Amanda's growing resignation while demonstrating loyalty that transcended logical analysis of their circumstances. The crisis reached its peak when Amanda signed the euthanasia authorization, her decision driven by inability to afford surgery and unwillingness to watch Hope suffer through inevitable decline. The paperwork felt like betraying Daniel's final gift, while acknowledging the reality that love couldn't overcome medical impossibility or financial constraints. But as she prepared to say goodbye to Hope, Amanda discovered a detail that changed everything. Hidden within Daniel's final letter was a second page she'd missed during the emotional chaos of the funeral. A page containing information about a police widows fund that Daniel had secretly been contributing to for years, specifically designated for veterinary emergencies involving K-9 families. The fund contained exactly $15,000, the precise amount needed for Hope's surgery, as if Daniel had somehow anticipated this exact crisis and prepared for it with the same meticulous planning that had characterized his police work. The discovery suggested that his final gift had included not just Hope herself, but the means to save her when medical crisis threatened to destroy everything. Amanda's realization that Daniel had provided for Hope's survival, even in circumstances he couldn't have predicted, created a moment of spiritual recognition that transcended rational explanation, while offering the hope that genuine miracles sometimes require human faith to become manifest. The surgery that followed was a testament to both medical skill and the power of community support that extends beyond financial contributions to encompass emotional investment in miracles that matter more than logic suggests they should. Dr. Martinez assembled a surgical team that included the region's best veterinary cardiac specialist, while the police department's K-9 unit provided round-the-clock support that ensured Hope received care that exceeded what most human patients experience. Amanda sat in the veterinary hospital's waiting room through 8 hours of surgery, her pregnancy making the vigil physically uncomfortable, but her determination to honor Daniel's faith in Hope's survival overriding every practical concern. Rex maintained position beside her chair, his calm alertness suggesting confidence in the outcome that Amanda couldn't yet feel. The breakthrough came when Dr. Rodriguez, the cardiac specialist, emerged from surgery with news that defied the grim predictions that had characterized Hope's prognosis. The defect was more complex than we initially diagnosed, he announced with professional satisfaction that couldn't hide his personal amazement. But it was also more repairable than we expected. The puppy's heart is stronger than it had any right to be given her circumstances. Hope's recovery was swift and complete, her vitality returning with the resilience that young animals display when given proper medical intervention. But more remarkable than her physical healing was the psychological transformation that her survival created in everyone who'd invested in her story. Rex's protective behavior evolved into playful interaction as Hope grew strong enough for supervised exercise, while Amanda found purpose that transcended her grief. The media attention that had begun with curiosity about Hope's miraculous discovery evolved into sustained coverage of her recovery and the broader implications of her story for understanding the bonds between law enforcement officers and their K-9 partners. National news outlets featured interviews with Amanda and Rex, while veterinary journals documented Hope's case as an example of successful intervention in complex cardiac defects. But the most meaningful transformation was personal rather than public. Amanda's relationship with Rex evolved from tolerating Daniel's partner to genuinely appreciating the dog's intelligence, loyalty, and protective instincts that now extended to both her and Hope. The German Shepherd, who'd once seemed like competition for Daniel's attention, became an essential family member whose presence made widowhood bearable. Hope's development exceeded everyone's expectations, her intelligence and eagerness to learn suggesting that she'd inherited the qualities that had made Rex such an exceptional police dog. By 6 months old, she was already responding to basic commands while displaying the calm temperament that K-9 works required. Her potential for following in her surrogate father's footsteps seemed unlimited. The decision to train Hope for police work was made collectively by Amanda Captain Morris and the K-9 unit supervisors, who recognized that she represented continuation of Daniel's legacy rather than replacement for what had been lost. Rex's role as her trainer and mentor provided him with purpose that honored his partnership with Daniel, while preparing Hope for service that would benefit future officers. Amanda's pregnancy progressed smoothly despite the stress of Daniel's death and Hope's medical crisis, her improved emotional state contributing to physical well-being that surprised her obstetrician. The baby due in November would grow up with Rex and Hope as surrogate siblings, creating the family that Daniel had dreamed of but hadn't lived to see. The house that had seemed too empty after Daniel's death was now filled with life that honored his memory while creating new traditions. Rex's protective relationship with Hope mirrored his partnership with Daniel, while Amanda discovered that caring for both animals provided structure and meaning that helped her process grief while preparing for single motherhood. The police department's response to Hope's story created lasting changes in how K-9 units approached partnership training and the transition of working dogs after handlers' deaths or retirement. Rex's successful mentorship of Hope established protocols for using experienced dogs to train successors, maximizing the investment in K-9 programs while providing continuity that benefited both animals and officers. 6 months after Daniel's funeral, Amanda attended the graduation ceremony, where Hope received her badge as the Dallas Police Department's newest K-9 officer. The puppy, who'd been discovered in her father's casket, was now ready to protect other officers with the same loyalty that Rex had shown Daniel, completing a circle of service that transcended individual lives to encompass institutional dedication. Rex's retirement ceremony, held the same day as Hope's graduation, was both celebration and transition, as the veteran dog formally passed responsibility to his protege while remaining available for training and support. His 8 years of distinguished service had earned him comfortable retirement with Amanda's family, where he could enjoy the peaceful life that his dangerous career had never allowed. The baby born 3 months later, Daniel Jr. arrived surrounded by family that included 2 German shepherds whose protective instincts ensured that he would never lack for security or companionship. Amanda's fears about raising a child alone were mitigated by the presence of animals whose loyalty extended from her deceased husband to encompass his entire family. The first birthday they celebrated without Daniel was made bearable by the presence of life he'd somehow arranged to sustain them. Hope's playful energy, Rex's steady companionship, and baby Daniel's innocent joy created atmosphere of healing that honored loss while embracing future possibility. The letter Amanda wrote to Daniel on that anniversary expressed gratitude that transcended words while acknowledging the miracle his final planning had created. You knew we'd need Hope to survive losing you, and somehow you arranged for Hope to survive losing everything. Rex keeps us safe, Hope keeps us laughing, and the baby keeps us moving forward. You're still taking care of us just like you always promised. The annual memorial service that developed around Daniel's death date became celebration of life rather than mourning of loss, with Hope demonstrating the skills she'd learned, while Rex received recognition for training that ensured Daniel's legacy continued through new partnerships. The ceremony honored sacrifice while celebrating continuity that made loss bearable. Amanda's decision to become a K-9 trainer herself was inspired by watching Rex educate Hope, while understanding that her husband's passion for police work could be channeled into supporting other partnerships. Her nursing background provided medical knowledge that enhanced training protocols, while her personal experience with K-9 relationships offered insights that academic study couldn't provide. The family that grew from tragedy became stronger than what loss had destroyed, with Rex and Hope serving as bridges between Daniel's memory and Amanda's future. Their presence proved that love could indeed transcend death when channeled through loyalty that recognized no boundaries of species or circumstance. As Amanda reflected on the year that had transformed her from grieving widow to confident single mother surrounded by faithful companions, she understood that Daniel's final gift wasn't just Hope herself, but the hope that life could continue meaningfully even after devastating loss. Rex's barking at the funeral had indeed announced a miracle, not just the puppy's survival, but the family's ability to heal through service love and the bonds that connect souls across the barrier of death. The Hope Protocol became standard procedure for police departments nationwide, establishing guidelines for caring for K-9 partners after handlers' deaths, while creating support systems that ensure working dogs receive appropriate placement and continued care. Hope's story influenced federal legislation providing veterinary benefits for retired police dogs, while Rex's successful mentorship model was adopted by K-9 units seeking to maximize training investments. The immediate consequences transformed how law enforcement approached the bonds between officers and their animal partners. The Dallas Police Department established the Daniel Granger Memorial Fund, providing emergency veterinary care for active and retired police dogs while requiring psychological evaluation and placement services for K-9s who lose their handlers to line-of-duty deaths. Educational institutions incorporated Hope's story into veterinary and law enforcement curricula, teaching future professionals about the complex relationships between working animals and their human partners. The case study became required reading in police academies, demonstrating how proper planning could ensure continuity of care even in tragic circumstances. The medical breakthrough achieved during Hope's cardiac surgery led to advances in veterinary cardiac procedures that benefited animals nationwide. Dr. Rodriguez's techniques were published in international veterinary journals, while the funding model that made Hope's surgery possible inspired similar emergency funds for pet medical care in communities across America. Amanda's transformation from police widow to canine advocate created a new profession focused on supporting law enforcement families dealing with working animal partnerships. Her consulting work helped other departments develop protocols for integrating family members into canine programs while preparing for transitions that death or retirement might require. The media coverage of Hope's story inspired thousands of donations to police canine programs, while generating public interest in law enforcement working animals that translated into increased funding and community support. The positive narrative provided balance to often negative coverage of police activities, demonstrating the human side of law enforcement through the lens of animal partnerships. Rex's retirement became a model for transitioning police dogs from active duty to family life, with veterinary and behavioral support that ensured successful adaptation to civilian routines. His continued involvement in Hope's training proved that retired working dogs could maintain purpose while enjoying the comfort their service had earned. The annual Daniel Granger Memorial Ceremony became a national event honoring fallen law enforcement officers and their canine partners, with Hope serving as spokesdog for programs supporting police working animals. Her presence at ceremonies across the country reminded communities that heroism comes in many forms, including the four-legged variety. The universal message resonated beyond law enforcement communities to influence how society viewed the bonds between humans and working animals across all professions. Hope's story proved that loyalty transcends death, that proper planning can create miracles, and that sometimes the most important gifts come in the smallest packages. The legacy continued through the officers whose lives Hope would eventually save during her police career, the families Rex protected through his retirement years, and the baby who grew up understanding that heroism is measured not by species, but by willingness to serve others regardless of personal cost.